Hello everybody, and welcome to Darkside Racing's small block Ford engine build. My name is Flo, and I'm going to be building this engine throughout this whole video, with a little bit of help from my girlfriend. Now this is my old 302 that's sitting in my Mustang right now. Now we're fixing to pull this thing out and build it really nice. So, take a look at this thing, because the next time you see this thing back in here, it's going to look completely different. To get started, we can go ahead and remove the engine. Once the engine is out and on the engine hoist, we can go ahead and put it on an engine stand. Then the disassembly process begins. We're going to go ahead and start with the intake manifold. Followed by the valve covers, the water pump, next we can go ahead and remove the timing cover, followed by the passenger side cylinder head, then the driver side cylinder head. Now we can flip the engine around and remove the timing chain and the camshaft, followed by the oil pump and the pickup. Once that's done, we can go ahead and start disassembling our short block. Oh man, looks like I blew a head gasket. Once the pistons and rods are out, we can go ahead and remove our main caps, followed by the crankshaft. Oh man, look at this. Broken pistons, and this thing still ran. Let's go ahead and just toss that over here with this pile. Well, looks like the disassembly process is complete. Now we're going to go ahead and take this dirty block to the machine shop, and when we get it back, it's going to look like this. Man, now this thing looks really nice. As you can see from the pictures, this machine shop does not play. Now this machine shop is called High Tech Machining, and they are in Palm Springs on William Road, and have all the necessary equipment and know-how to get the job done right. Now that we got done looking at the block, we can go ahead and mask it off. Now you want to mask this thing off really good. Every little place that you don't want to get paint in, because we are fixing to paint this thing very nicely. Next, once that's done, we're going to go ahead and start grinding away at this thing to get the block surfaces as smooth as we can. I'm using a carbide bit to get off all the rough surfaces. Now this can be a very timely process, but it's well worth it, especially in the end result. When the block looks perfect, it's going to be really nice. Look at this. Even the kid wants to help. Look at her go. That's my little daughter.
Look at that, Flo.
It's smoother. That's cool, huh? Good job.
Which one?
Right there, it looks like it's not smooth. Right here. See that? Feel that. part right there.
What is that for?
You didn't know I was recording you, huh? There you go. That's the way to do it right there. Looking good. It's all looking good. Look at that, how smooth it is there. And
Yeah,
here.
look at it. That's smooth.
Yep.
Look at my fingers dirty.
You know where to sand it. Give me 5. Alright.
Once that's done, we can clearly see how nice and smooth this block is. Every surface has been smoothed down. Man, this paint is going to stick on here very, very nicely. Once that's done, you want to go ahead and give your block a thorough wipe down. And make sure it's completely dry with a blow dryer. Looks like she's got that covered. Once that's done, we can go ahead and lay down a very nice coat of primer. Now all the primer and paint we're going to be using here is from Duplicolor, and it's a high quality paint and primer that has ceramic in it and can resist temperatures up to 500 degrees. After about 20 minutes of flash time for the primer to dry, we can go ahead and lay down our paint. And bam, there it is. Now this paint came out really, really nice. As you can see, all the hard work and grinding and sanding and smoothing of the block pays off in the end. I mean, this is some real nice detail that'll really catch some judges' eyes at a car show. Man, every single shot of this block just looks gorgeous. Now you might not see this in the pictures, but what we did is I took a razor blade and cut off all the edges of the paint on every edge of this motor. That way the paint looks perfect and we also don't get no chips. Now that this part's done, we can go ahead and move on with the assembly process. Looks like the doctor's going in. To get started, me and my girlfriend are going to start by installing these ARP main studs. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and snug it down with a ratchet and an Allen bit. Now that that's done, we can try to get this freaking plastic off of these bearings that come with the shipping. These things are tough to get off, but eventually it can be achieved. Once that's done, we can go ahead and clean off the surfaces in the block where the bearings are going to be seated into. Now you want to make sure you clean these off really, really good. That way you get the right tolerances. Remember, when building an engine like this, being clean is key. Once that's done, we can go ahead and install the main bearings into the block. Once that's done, we can give our crankshaft one final look and a final wipe down to make sure that it's completely free of any debris left over. Look, my girlfriend's holding my shaft. Well, all joking aside, we can get back to business and we can start by lubing up these main bearings with this Royal Purple Max Tough synthetic assembly lubricant. Now this stuff is great and will really protect our main bearings upon initial startup. Also, don't forget to smear a little bit of assembly lubricant on the sides of the thrust bearing. Next, go ahead and smear the assembly lubricant all over the main bearings. Make sure you have an even nice coat all over the bearing. Next, we can go ahead and drop in this heavy crankshaft, being extra careful not to scratch the main journals with the studs. Man, this thing looks like it's going to spin nicely. With the crankshaft in place, now we can go ahead and clean off our main caps, followed by installing the main bearing into the main cap. Now make sure that the bearing is fully seated into the cap. I don't know what's going on here, but after a little bit of goofing off, we can go ahead and get back down to business by lubing up this main bearing, smearing it all around to get a nice even coat, dropping it into place, a couple of light taps from a hammer will make sure that the bearing is seated. Also, don't forget to smear a little bit of semi-lubricant on the side of the bearing on the main cap. Now repeat this until all the main caps are in. Next, we can go ahead and install our washers, followed by ARP Ultra Torque Assembly Lubricant. Now this stuff is critical to have on the main studs in order to ensure a proper torque reading. What's going on here? Looks like I was a little bit hungry. Oh man. Anyways, back to lubing up these main studs. Oh no! It looks like that stuff that I ate earlier must have had a side effect. Looks like I got a pretty nice little trip going. Well, now that I'm down from my high, let's go ahead and continue putting these nuts on. Now don't forget to get some ARP assembly lubricant on the nuts also. This will ensure a proper torque reading. Now when I put on these nuts, I like to pay attention to a little bit of detail. For example, I like to put this ARP logo on the nut facing upwards and not towards the main cap. Just gives a little bit of extra detail. Oh no! Looks like I got some stuff on me. Hope it doesn't get on my necklace. Too late. Man, this stuff can get nasty. Well, now we can finish putting on our nuts, and we can just snug them down till they get to the main cap. Next, we want to go ahead and grab our Matco torque wrench and torque down these main caps in 3 steps to 80 foot-pounds in the factory sequence. Wow, now this crankshaft looks like it's spinning very nicely. Next, we can go ahead and move on to installing the pistons and the rod assembly into the block. But before we can do that, we have to make sure we gap our rings right. In order to do this, it's pretty simple. Go ahead and put your ring into the cylinder that's going to be assembled into, square it up with the squaring tool, grab your feeler gauge, set it to whatever you want the gap to be. In our case, for the street engine, we're going with 26 thousandths of an inch for the top ring. Now check to see if the feeler gauge goes in there. If it doesn't, that means you got to take some material off. So go ahead and head over to your piston ring filing tool, make a couple of passes, insert. Next you want to deburr the ring of any burrs left over from the filing. You want to do this with some 1000 grit sandpaper. Next, install the ring back into the cylinder Square it up again with the squaring tool. Grab your feeler gauge. Try to fit the 26 thousandths back in there. Looks like we're still not there. A couple more passes should do it. Make sure you only take off a little bit at a time, because you can always take off more, but you can't put it back on. A little bit more deburring to make sure we don't scratch the cylinder walls. Now after checking again, looks like it fit in there and we're right on the money. Next, we can go ahead and insert the second ring. Now you want to insert this the opposite way of the top ring. You want to insert these rings in here in the same way that they're going to go during final assembly. Square it up with a squaring tool once again. Now you might be wondering to yourself, how exactly do you find out the proper ring gap size? Well, it's simple. For a street engine like ours, you want to go ahead for the top ring and multiply the bore size times 0.0065, which is going to equal out to 26 thousandths. For the second ring, you want to go ahead and multiply the bore size times 0.0045, which is going to equal 18 thousandths. And for the oiling rings, you want to have a minimum of 15 thousandths. Now you want to grab your feeler gauge and measure. For the second ring, we're going to go with 18 thousandths. Looks like we're not there. So we're going to have to pull the ring out, do a couple of passes on the filing tool, deburr the edges, go ahead and install it back in, square it up, measure again, and once again, we are right on the money. Now make sure when you do this, you have all the piston rings in a separate Ziploc baggie for every cylinder that you're working on, because you do not want to get these mixed up. Once these things are in their cylinder bag, make sure you keep them closed. This one is for cylinder number 6. Now that that tough process is over, we can go ahead and move on for assembly. First thing we want to do is take the rod bearing and put it into the rod. Next, we want to stagger the rings. Now you want to make sure you do this right and have these rings staggered right. Otherwise, you could end up with an engine that has blow-by. Next, here comes the messy part. You got to really lube up these things good with some motor oil before you put them into the cylinder. Also, you want to put some assembly lubricant on the bearing and smear it all around to get a nice even coat. Once that's done, we can go ahead and put the piston and rod assembly into the ring compressor. Now as you can see on the rod studs, we have some blue boots that are there, and they're designed to keep the journal from getting nicked when you push down the piston into the cylinder. Next we can drop it in and send it home. Next, go ahead and flip over the block, remove the protective boots, grab your rod cap and insert the bearing into it, put on some assembly lubricant, put the cap on, a couple light taps from a brass hammer will make sure it's seated, put on your nuts. Now also, don't forget to put on ARP Ultra Torque assembly lubricant. This way you ensure a proper torque reading. Once that's done, we can go ahead and grab our Matco torque wrench and torque down these rod caps to 50 foot-pounds in 2 steps. The rods should be able to move back and forth freely on the crankshaft. If they don't, you've got some problems. Next, go ahead and spin your crankshaft and position it to where the next rod that you're going to push into the cylinder is going to be at. And just repeat the procedure until all the pistons are installed. Like right here, we are installing the rings. First, we're going to start with this oiling ring. Next, we can put on the second ring. Followed by the top compression ring. Now don't forget to stagger these things correctly. Once that's done, you guessed it, the messy part. We got to oil these things up. And also, don't forget to get some oil on the wrist pin. This will ensure proper lubrication upon startup. Next, we can drop the piston and rod assembly into the ring compressor. Drop the assembly into the block. Make sure it's straight and send it on home. Once that's done, we can go ahead and lube up the rod cap again. Drop it into place. Couple light taps from the brass hammer. Put on the nuts. And torque them down also, once again, in 2 steps to 50 foot-pounds. Now, I can have my big-breasted girlfriend turn the block over for me so we can install another piston. Couple light taps from the hammer, and we torque them down again. Once again, she's going to flip the block over for me. Looks like she's having a tough time. Now you want to do this until all of your pistons and rods are completely into the block. Once you do that, your assembly should spin very nice and freely, just like ours is doing right over here. Oh man, even the top side looked good. Look at them pistons go. Wow, it's so amazing and so cool how we can go from this to this. Well, that does it for our short block assembly. Please stay tuned and join us while we do the top end. Thank you.